The wedding hall glittered like a scene from a dream Lila had never wanted. Golden chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, their crystals scattering light across a sea of strangers dressed in silk and tailored suits. Every table overflowed with flowers imported from somewhere far away, the scent of roses heavy in the air. Cameras flashed, laughter rippled, a string quartet played a song that sounded both joyful and cold. Lila stood at the end of the aisle, her fingers tightening around the small bouquet of white lilies. Her veil brushed against her cheeks as a faint tremor went through her. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, judging, whispering, wondering what kind of girl agreed to marry Adrian Hale, the heir to the Hale fortune. The tabloids had already called her a social climber. The daughter of a struggling architect marrying a millionaire. It was too convenient for them not to sneer. Her mother sat in the front row, pale but smiling faintly. That was why Lila was here. The doctors had said the treatments were working, but the bills had piled higher each month. When Adrian's father had proposed the marriage contract, to merge their companies, to save both families, her mother had begged her to consider. It's just a signature, darling. You deserve stability. The music swelled. The doors at the other end opened. Adrian Hale stepped in, tall and perfectly composed, his black suit fitting him like armor. His expression didn't soften when his gaze met hers. If anything, it hardened. He looked at her as though she were a burden, another business transaction he was being forced to sign off on. Lila swallowed hard. She had seen him only twice before the engagement. Both times, he had been polite in the way people were polite when they didn't care. He'd nodded, shaken her hand, and left. Now, standing beside him, she could feel the distance in every inch of space between them. The priest began to speak. Words blurred in her ears. Vows, duty, forever, and she repeated what she was told to repeat. Adrian's voice was steady when he said, "I do," but there was no warmth in it, no trace of sincerity. When it came time to exchange rings, his hand brushed hers briefly. His skin was cold. Applause broke out as they were pronounced husband and wife. The photographers crowded closer, their flashes blinding. Adrian stepped forward to kiss her cheek, not her lips, a gesture so stiff it almost drew laughter from the crowd. When the ceremony ended, they walked down the aisle together, smiling for the cameras. His hand barely touched hers. To the watching world, they were a picture of wealth and perfection. Inside, Lila felt hollow. In the car ride to the reception, silence sat between them like a wall. Adrian looked out the window, his jaw tight. She could see the reflection of his expression in the glass, irritation, exhaustion, maybe even disgust. "You don't have to pretend," she said quietly, breaking the silence. "I know you didn't want this." He turned to her, his eyes cool and sharp. "Good. Then we understand each other. Play your part, and we can both move on." Her fingers clenched in her lap. "My part. The obedient wife my father expects to see." He turned back to the window before she could respond. The driver's eyes flicked up to the mirror, then quickly away. At the reception, Adrian disappeared after the first dance. Lila stood among smiling strangers, accepting congratulations she didn't deserve. When the crowd finally thinned, she slipped out to the balcony. The night air was cool against her skin, the city lights glittering below like a million secrets. Behind her, the door opened. For a second, she hoped it was Adrian. But it was only his mother, elegant and unreadable. "You must be patient with him," she said softly. "He doesn't forgive easily. The last woman he trusted broke him. This marriage is complicated." Lila forced a small smile. "I don't want his forgiveness. Just peace." When she was alone again, she looked down at the ring on her finger. It gleamed under the moonlight, beautiful, heavy, and cold. "Tonight," she thought, "I became Mrs. Hale, but tomorrow, I'll have to learn how to survive it." The mansion felt more like a museum than a home. Every surface gleamed, polished to perfection, every painting hung with military precision. The silence was so deep Lila could hear her own heartbeat echo in the marble hallways. After the wedding, Adrian had driven her here without a word, handed her a set of keys, and disappeared into his study. That was 3 weeks ago. Now, she had begun to learn the rhythm of his absence. Breakfast at 7, which he rarely attended. Meetings all day, Sometimes a late dinner if he was forced to entertain business partners, otherwise nothing but the soft click of his office door closing behind him. The staff spoke to her in hushed tones, polite but distant, unsure how to treat a woman who was both their employer's wife and his stranger. In the beginning, she tried. She left notes for him on the dining table, simple things, dinner's ready, or, hope your meeting went well. They disappeared each morning without reply. Once, she baked him a pie, remembering how his secretary had mentioned his sweet tooth. The pie sat untouched in the fridge for a week until one of the maids quietly threw it away. Lila turned her efforts elsewhere. She helped in the garden, where the roses were dying from neglect. She learned the names of every member of the staff, listened to their small troubles, and began to fill the empty mansion with the warmth it lacked. The cook, Mrs. Winthrop, grew fond of her, slipping her tea and advice in equal measure. "He's not cruel, just frozen," the older woman said one afternoon. "It's been years since anyone got through to him." Lila smiled faintly. "I'm not trying to get through to him. I just don't want to disappear in this house." That night, she passed his study on her way upstairs. The door was slightly ajar, light spilling into the hallway. Inside, Adrian sat at his desk, a glass of whiskey beside him, his tie loosened, eyes fixed on some document. For a moment she hesitated. She could almost see the boy he must have been once, before the armor. "Adrian," she said softly. He didn't look up. "What is it? I thought you might like some dinner." "Mrs. Winthrop made roast lamb." "I've eaten," he said, still reading. She nodded, even though it was clear he hadn't. "All right, I'll leave you be." Just as she turned, he spoke again, quiet but sharp. "You don't have to pretend to care. I know why you're here." Her heart sank. "Why do you think I'm here?" He finally looked at her then, his blue eyes cold. "Because this marriage benefits your family. Don't act like it's anything more." The words stung more than she wanted them to. "You think I wanted this?" she asked. He laughed once, bitterly. "Doesn't everyone want to marry a millionaire?" She didn't answer. There was no point. Instead, she turned and walked away, the soft rustle of her dress fading down the corridor. In his study, Adrian sat motionless, staring at the door long after it closed. For a moment, guilt flickered across his face. Then he drowned it with another sip of whiskey. Days passed. They lived like ghosts in the same house, crossing paths only when necessary. One morning, Lila found a stack of newspapers on the breakfast table. On the front page was Adrian's photograph, smiling beside a beautiful woman in a glittering gown. The headline read, "Adrian Hale reunites with former fiancé at charity gala." Lila stared at it for a long time, her chest tightening. The woman was the same ex-fiancé his mother had mentioned, the one who'd left him for money. Yet there he was, looking alive in a way he never had with her. When Adrian entered the room, she slid the paper toward him. "You seem happy in this picture." His eyes flicked to it, then to her. "Don't read into things that don't concern you." "It does concern me. You're my husband." He smirked faintly. "Only on paper." Something inside her snapped then, not with anger but with quiet exhaustion. "Then maybe I should stop trying to be anything more than that." She rose from the table and left the room before he could answer. Later, when she passed the garden, she saw the roses she'd been tending beginning to bloom again, pale pink, fragile, alive. She touched one gently, wondering if anything in this house could truly bloom when so much of it was built on ice. That night, she sat by the window in her room, watching the lights flicker in Adrian's study across the courtyard. He was still awake, as always, still working, still alone. Maybe, she whispered to herself, that's how he prefers it. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice she couldn't silence whispered back, or maybe that's just how he's learned to survive. The storm came suddenly, tearing through the night with a violence that rattled the windows and sent rain slashing against the glass. Lila sat in her room, a half-packed suitcase open on the bed. The mansion was dark. The power had gone out an hour ago, leaving only the flicker of candles to push back the shadows. She'd made her decision. She couldn't live like a ghost any longer, haunting hallways where she wasn't wanted. She folded a shawl carefully, her hands trembling. A letter lay on top of the pile of clothes, addressed to Adrian. It wasn't an apology. It was an explanation. She'd written that she never wanted his money, that she only stayed because she had nowhere else to go, because she'd thought maybe kindness could bridge the cold between them. She told him she was leaving the house and the name Mrs. Hale behind. As thunder rolled, she lit one more candle, setting it near the box on her dresser, the one she hadn't opened since before the wedding. Inside were the letters she used to write to her late father, her only way of speaking to him when grief became too heavy. She ran her fingers over the faded envelopes. She couldn't take them all, but she didn't want to throw them away either. The door creaked open suddenly. "Lila," Adrian's voice cut through the storm. He stood in the doorway, his shirt half unbuttoned, rain on his shoulders. He looked as if he'd been searching for her. "You're leaving," he said flatly. She froze. "You've made it clear I'm not wanted here." He stepped inside, his eyes catching the flicker of candlelight, and then landing on the open box. He frowned, moving closer. "What's that?" "Nothing that concerns you." But he ignored her, reaching down to pick up one of the letters. She started forward, but he'd already opened it. His eyes scanned the first few lines, her careful handwriting, her words to her father. "I wish you were here, Papa. I don't know how to live in a house that doesn't feel like home." Adrian read another, then another. His expression changed, the anger fading, replaced by something more complex: confusion, guilt, disbelief. Then he noticed a folded document beneath the letters. He pulled it free, his brow furrowing as he read. It was an old financial report, proof that it had been Lila's late father who had secretly invested in and saved Hale Enterprises years ago when the company had been on the verge of collapse. Without him, the Hales would have lost everything. He looked up at her slowly. "You knew?" She shook her head. "Not until after he died. He never told me. I didn't even want the marriage, Adrian. But your father came to us, and my mother," her voice caught, "she was sick. I thought I was doing the right thing." For a long moment, only the rain spoke between them. Then Adrian whispered, "I've been hating you for the wrong reasons." Lila turned away, tears slipping down her cheeks. "It doesn't matter anymore. I'm leaving." He stepped closer, his voice rough. "Lila, please, don't." She froze at the sound of his plea, the first real emotion she'd ever heard in his voice. But she didn't turn around. "It's too late, Adrian. You can't take back months of silence." Behind her, he lowered his head, the truth settling heavily in his chest. For the first time, Adrian Hale realized what he'd lost, and what he'd never truly deserved. Morning crept into the house slowly, spilling pale light through the curtains that Lila had once chosen herself, soft ivory, gentle, unassuming. She hadn't slept. Her suitcase sat by the door, packed and ready, but her resolve felt fragile now, like glass that might shatter with one wrong touch. The storm had passed, but the silence it left behind was heavier than ever. She moved quietly through the hall, the scent of rain lingering in the air. Downstairs, she found the staff already awake, whispering among themselves. Mrs. Winthrop gave her a sad, knowing look. "Are you really going, dear?" Lila nodded, forcing a small smile. "It's for the best." Before she could step outside, Adrian appeared at the foot of the staircase. He looked as though he hadn't slept either, dark circles under his eyes, his tie loose, his usual calm replaced by something raw. In his hand, he held the box of letters. "Please," he said softly, "don't leave yet." Lila froze, her heart tightening. "Adrian, there's nothing left to say." "There's everything to say," he replied, taking a hesitant step closer. "I read all of them. Every word. You were writing to your father, but it felt like you were speaking to me, the man I should have been." She looked away, her fingers tightening around the handle of her suitcase. "Those letters weren't meant for you. I know," he said quietly, "but maybe they should have been. You've been trying to bring life into this house, and all I did was kill whatever light you brought with you." His voice faltered. "You were right about one thing. I never wanted this marriage. But I think I was wrong about everything else." Lila's throat ached. "Why now, Adrian? Why say this when I've already decided to go?" He moved closer, close enough that she could see the sincerity and fear in his eyes. "Because last night I finally understood. It wasn't your family that needed saving all those years ago. It was mine. Your father didn't just rescue our company, he gave me the chance to have a life I never earned." And then I punished his daughter for it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air felt heavy, charged with things too long unsaid. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. But I'm done pretending this marriage is just a deal. I want to make it real, if you'll let me. Not for business, not for my father, not even for appearances. For us. Tears welled in Lila's eyes. She wanted to believe him, but her heart was bruised from too much hope. You can't just decide you care overnight, she whispered. No, he admitted, but I can decide to start trying every day from now on. Something in his voice broke her resolve. She set the suitcase down slowly. The sound of it hitting the floor echoed through the hall like a quiet surrender. When Adrian reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. His touch was warm this time. Hesitant but real. I thought I was marrying a stranger, he said softly, but I found the only person who ever truly saw me. And for the first time since their wedding day, Lila let herself smile. Small, uncertain, but genuine. The storm outside had passed, but the one between them, at last, had begun to clear.